telling them that if somebody shoots at them, they can darn well shoot back.
I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty! Oh, give me death!
A dark cloud is finally lifting across the world as U.S. military intelligence and their global partners are destroying the deep state criminal power structure that has ruled over our planet for hundreds of years.
We are free with the God-given right, and we shall not yield that right to any power on earth.
Hi, I'm Scott McKay. The world is at, and I am your host on The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of strength.
You'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point, so come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they a government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio!
Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. It's about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, right along here with Ransom, Godwin, Mountain High TV. We're going to try to spin some tales this evening of where our world sits right now and where it's moving to. Clearly, you can see where it's heading to by the end of the year. But then how can you use that as an advantage, an opportunity, something positive for our world, that to take that step into that change and use it for the betterment of all humanity, those neighbors around you, that city you live in? It's clearly a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth type of plan, and it's very easy to know once we get to a final point where, at least in this introductory phase, is moving from fiat money into a central bank digital currency that'll have many different pillars of asset value, gold and silver, digitized forests, carbon credits, carbon allocation credits on the personal side, otherwise known as personal carbon allocation credits. I mean, they're going to have to think of a different word to say that. Now, even if I'm looking at the whole in the cryptocurrencies as well, there's going to be a fair few different pillars to reset the economy, but it's got to get that bad to do the reset. And we're getting into it. And then, you know what? There's going to be a double twist with the overflip off the 9-meter high board is going to be the food shortages to get you to sign up for that digital rationing card. because they have to have it all digital, and the only way they're going to push you into it is making you hungry, and your family's hungry. And once you're hungry, you're going to go to the digital rationing card, because you then, I can get food if I put this thing on my phone. Oh, and also there's some money already added in that thing, universal basic income. Oh, CBDCs. Great. I'll take it because my family can eat again, and we have money to spend and to buy something again versus starving on the street. That's where it's going. So how easy is it to see the next plays moving out? Like, just understand, that's the final goal for this, at least this step of it. There's all these things, Agenda 2030 and Klaus and all these people. They're talking way out there in the future. The future is the next step for you and I to contend with and learn about, understand where the opportunity is as they try to push this in. So, Ransom, I appreciate you joining me tonight. So much to talk about, man. Thank you. I am so grateful you're here to share ideas. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to add Ransom in. How space case am I? Ransom, if you're listening, please hold. My bad. I forgot to add you in there. How is that? Well, let me explain how that is, because we brewed up a bunch of grappa yesterday. And when I say that, my friend does wine. Ransom, are you there? Here we come. So another thing just to throw in while Ransom's joining us here. I can't believe I spaced that, Ransom. Thank you for joining us. As I was saying, the reason I'm spacing this is my friend who brews wine, he has a commercial license to do wine production. One of their 20-gallon caskets blew out for some reason, and more oxygen got in and made the wine taste really vinegary, not very palatable at all. Like, you would not drink it. They couldn't sell it. So we have a couple friends who have a pot still, and we went over and took 20 gallons of ruined wine and turned it into 130 proof grappa. So I've been experimenting, try to mix it and break it off with water tonight to get the correct tastes. So welcome to this kind of show. Ransom, thank you for joining, man.
How's it going? Doing some wine testing, huh?
Grappa testing. That's a grappa tasting. So This is what you do in Europe is you take those fruits and you distill them down. And now we have a whole bunch of rubbing alcohol of that methanol and acetone that we couldn't drink. So now what do we have? Everybody there got a free pint of rubbing alcohol out of that to make sure you get the methanols out before you do it. I was stoked. I got something of a medicinal value off the beginning of the brew that was a non-usable. You couldn't drink it. So here I am, like, looking at naturally made, fruit fermented, and wow, making medicine out of fruit is just the most amazing thing. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I use plenty of plants for medicines as well, of different kinds. You're talking about these far off things in the future. I don't know, man. I went to the store earlier and they had, some kind of emergency going on. They had their little drone up, filming it, and I fly a drone too. But then I was looking at all of the stuff through the headlines right now, and it's like we're literally in what's that movie with Harrison Ford there with the robot people, Blade Runner. And the way that they're from China to New York, all over the place, they're using more and more of these drones. And it's funny because I kind of predicted the fact that, if we started going into a real type war scenario, that you would see all the AI robot stuff. And I kind of brought that up last week. But
you did, man. I will say that you were talking about, they're going to go to robotics on maybe not. The person controlling the robot is still a live person, but they're going to send the robot to the battlefield. That's what you talked about last couple shows.
Yeah, and now they're doing that. They're actually saying that through this winter, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict will be more about bots. So, and they've already sent several of the bots in. Most of them have a human that's running them, but they all have the ability to use AI to kind of decide their own things. And all that has to do is to be turned on. And they're kind of putting it in our face everywhere. And this is a Blade Runner type scene right here for New York City skyline to fill with advertising drones all over the place. So, in China right now, they're using them to scan people's faces, to herd people, to kettle people, to threaten people, to keep track of people. I mean, it's going in a weird, really fast-paced future dystopic movie here. So it's not that far away. So the whole world's talking about hyperinflation. I read an article the other day talking about, Argentina, and it's well past 100% inflation there. And people are just dropping off. So the tourists get there and the first thing they do is have to go get almost a backpack full of money just to do simple things because it's becoming worthless. And then I'm sure you might have saw this article right here from BBC. Bank of England expects UK to fall into the longest ever recession. So across the board, all the countries are talking about superinflation, hyperinflation, and a super long recession, a global recession. No one's arguing this fact now. So what does that mean for everybody? Well, they're obviously talking about the money that it takes to run human society, which is energy and food and all these things. So this is where everybody's going to be hurt. At the same time, it's like the feudalist idea that we've been talking about. The BBC's kind of talking about the UK going into a super long recession. But meanwhile, the new king there, King Charles, like we were joking about weeks ago when he kind of took the kingship. And a lot of people told me that's not true. In the comments, they're telling me, I got a couple of emails telling me that we make up stuff. So here it is right here from the Sun. Bloody hell. King Charles reveals he's related to sinister figure from history. Just like we were saying, we weren't joking. The king has told Luke Evans how his bloodline shows he's related to Vlad the Impaler. So we weren't joking around about that. These noble families, they're into some weird stuff, and they keep track of their heritage. And now that they kind of have the globe in the palm of their hand once again, like they have in the past 2 world wars, they're going to start doing some really dark stuff. I hate to say that. I was listening again to an interview I did with a Holocaust survivor, Eva Moses Kor, and a lot of the stuff that she was talking about is, she agreed with me that the governments of the world were pulling tactics right out of the Nazi book, and she couldn't argue with that. And she talked a lot about how they were trying to shut down free speech everywhere, including hers, because they didn't like her message. It didn't go along with, exactly as everybody else's message was, because basically she was telling the youth of Germany that they had no reason to be ashamed or guilty of something they had nothing to do with, absolutely nothing to do with. And she recognized that as a Holocaust survivor, that they were pushing this guilt on everyone. All the way from the climate to, what skin tone you happen to be. They found every single divisive way to slice up the world right before they got ready to balkanize the entire world. And they're doing a good job of it, if you ask me. They're, and don't worry about it, because, everybody's about to probably get sick. If you've been paying attention to the local news broadcast or the national ones, they're really pushing the idea that this year's going to be very bad for everyone, for not only RSV, which is an upper respiratory infection that, if you might have a compromised immune system or recently have an immuno change, I'll say it that way. If your immune system has changed recently, you might be really susceptible to these, natural things that go around, like the common cold, otherwise known as COVID, and the flu and RSV. But don't worry about it, because guess what? The world government has been thinking of you. They love you, and they've been thinking forward, and they have a new Pfizer BioNTech, combined medicine for you, that's so that you can take care of the flu and the common whatever. And don't worry about it. Yes, it is one of those new type of technologies. I don't want to say it because that's one of the key words. We're literally in that movie that I was talking about. We're in that movie Blade Runner. They're trying to make fake people. They're going into the AI wars. They've completely been busted from top to bottom about conspiring with all the mega companies to censor every little bit of what you say and make sure that they kettle you back into the right opinions by punishing people. And, everybody from PayPal to other banking institutions are threatening to end people's way of life, their ability to use and, benefit from digital money and real money. And I really wanted to get your thoughts on this inventor of stablecoin. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but he put out a lot of bizarre tweets and messages on other social media platforms indicating that he is not a suicidal person and that there are some alphabet agencies after him, and then he wound up dead. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I personally do not believe this great reset is inevitable. It's not guaranteed rock carved in stone that those 500 million. The only reason this is allowed to move forward is humanity lets it move forward. So when you look at I'm going to want to respond to a couple comments here. Like you hit it right there. Balkanizing the entire world. Because if we look back in chapters of history, what you need to run society, and I will give you an order of it, food is first. If you don't have enough food, you'd never have a society, because hungry, malnourished people laying on the streets next to bars of gold that do them no good, if they don't have enough calories to move and actually do something to labor, grow your own food, filter your own water. Like if you're not at that base level where you're fed and like you're not getting sick, then society does not function. And I'll tell you a story. I do a lot of research, especially over into the cattles, the grains, dairy, this sort of thing. If you go back into, say, the 1460s, and this is in England, they were meticulous. If I say British Navy, 1750, like what are you thinking? That is the establishment of the establishment. It's the most precise records. Or if I was to say Spanish fleet manifests from the New World. Two of those things were so precise. You absolutely know that the most precise calculations, measurements that would blow away our own supercomputers right now, done by humans in manifest, England and Spain both. I'll cover 200 years of that. Food first. If there's no food, your society does not function. Then you need energy second, and then you need asset values third. Now understand, we are coming into a 400-year cycle of crop losses based on solar activity in a 400-year cycle, not an 11.8-year or 11-year cycle from solar maximum to solar minimum. We're talking about a 400-year solar minimum that we've already descended into, and the food crop losses are more and more and more every day forward from now for at least the next I'm going to say at least into way deep 2025, 26. Because Valentina Zarkova talked and called on governments, and this is about 2016, 17, correct me if I'm wrong there, with Double Dynamo in the Sun and those release of the peer-reviewed research papers, which were retracted after, I guess, duress. We haven't heard from her in a while. She was calling on governments for 2028 to stockpile for massive famines across the planet where we'd only grow 9 or 10% of the normal amount of food that we grow today. And it was very clean, like the way the sun affects our magnetic field jet streams and how the temperatures of the planet are affected. Or more volcanism occurs, which allows larger eruptions, which we are into a new year without a summer from the southern hemisphere Tonga eruption. It's right on track as we move forward with, okay, this is the biggest thing to understand. This 400-year low in solar activity on its own cycle And those couple into 5 also of the 400 years, which is once in a 2,000-year solar activity cycle. And then we have the 11.8 year or the 11-year solar cycle, solar maximum, solar minimum. And included within that, we also get the centennial minimums, which is also on the 100-year. So you get different variations of solar activity from the solar maximum, solar minimum 11-year, solar maximum, solar minimum 100-year, solar maximum, solar minimum 400-year cycle, which we're definitely entering into now. And the 400 or the 2,000-year solar maximum, the 2,000-year solar minimum. And it wouldn't surprise me if we're going into a 2,000-year type solar minimum activity. The world as you understand it cannot grow enough food from this point forward. It just simply cannot, based on the planting and harvesting seasons being so shrunken. Why are there droughts now? Why are there a year's worth of rain in a single storm every single week for 5 or 6 weeks in Australia? These cloud cells, these jet streams are bunching on top of each other, and now we got cosmic rays because of a low magnetic field around the Earth. We got a lot more cosmic rays coming in, creating an enormous amount of extra rainfall. And that in turn is bunching in. And then once you start to get all these bunch ups and these 3 things in the atmosphere, we got our jet streams, which are the flows of, how does the wind around our planet flow? And then we got the cloud cells from the equator to 30 north to 60 north to North Pole. And then also, if you follow the same equator down to 20 south, or 30 south, 30 to 60 south, and then back down to Antarctica. And now we got this whole new layer of cosmic rays blasting in, creating these muons, which then are the precursor to a cloud droplet, which then form. And it's like clockwork. When you see this cycle comes in, these 3 things happen at the same time, and you could talk all that sciencey mumbo jumbo, whatever, look out in the solar system type thing, jumbo. What it all leads to is less food production globally. Like, do you think the reason all these things are happening now are because it's just happening now? No, it's at the point where it can't be hidden any longer, and anybody looking in the skies and can see the weather's strange, temperatures are strange. But it's going to quickly coalesce into, those strange things we've been seeing in the weather out our back door or front deck are now turning into global crop losses. And please remember, Ransom summed it up super well here. To run a society, what do you need? What's going to run society? Food first, energy second, monetary asset value third. Now we are collapsing on the food front right now. Seriously, anybody listening? This is a distant early warning. They're not going to grow 50% of the food they normally grow in the Southern Hemisphere, starting right now. I encourage you to do your own research. I wish you would try to debunk me. Please try to prove me wrong. Please, please, please. Can you do that, me a favor? Anybody listening tonight, I want you to prove me wrong on the planting seasons being delayed in the Southern Hemisphere so much now that if they don't have short seed or short season seeds, they're not going to produce the food this year. And I wish everybody out there would do your own research to back check that and try to prove me wrong. Because these temperatures are 3 to 4 degrees Celsius below normal across many countries in the Southern Hemisphere. This delays planting or does not allow food to grow. If you look at the temperature data in Uruguay and Paraguay, and you have to go to their meteorological sites in those 2 countries, they're at a little bit higher altitude. They still grow crops, don't get me wrong, they do, massive producers, soybean mainly. But because they're at a little bit higher altitude, that ash and the rainfall and the temperatures has slashed some areas. I was so shocked, 5 degrees Celsius, 5 Celsius. That's like, 13.5 degrees Fahrenheit difference in the temperatures. You cannot grow food at that point. That Tonga eruption should be the #1 news story on the planet. We cannot grow enough food from this point forward. Now, see, this is an opportunity because I think a lot of it's fixed or, let's say, planned, coordinated. Because if you took Ukraine out of the picture, that would cause everything else to cascade. So the cascade I'm talking about is including the Ukraine not exporting grains, not planting the winter wheat this year, and also not planting the corn for the late season corn. So if you looked at the news, I did a full video on this over in Ukraine last week. Their agricultural minister said they are not going to plant winter wheat this year. Zero. Nothing being planted. So that means zero harvest, nothing being harvested. Now, if you take the Ukraine out of it, they were exporting some 15 million tons out to other countries. So that comes offline to zero or close to zero. You know, these grain corridors that are going out, it's all like rejected animal feed that the EU wouldn't accept as animal feed. That's going outbound to like southern Sudan and stuff. It's not going to hit our markets. Not will. It never will. Never meant to. It's meant that we're like the United Nations to give himself a pat on the back and be like, hey, look, we sent some grains. But, dude, it didn't pass inspection for EU animal feed. And somehow they load it on a boat and sent it to the Sudan. And they're like, hey, look what we did. We can send them food. Okay, I guess. If Ukraine was still functional and as it did before, we would not be talking about this problem. Yes, the Tonga eruption would smash Southern Hemisphere production, but it would be, you know, sketchy, but it wouldn't be all life-ending because Ukraine would still be throwing out as much food and all Russia would be throwing out and the fertilizers would still be going, all the chemical factories. So we had the pesticides and herbicides and the world would still function. But once the Tonga eruption happened, we can't grow enough food in the Southern Hemisphere, 50% down this year, and the Ukraine happened. Like somebody gamed this, man. You know, Ransom, you always talk about AI, but somebody gamed this out. Ukraine had to be taken out because the fertilizer, the food, and then the responses of it to shut down all the chemical and metals smelting across Europe and pipeline taken out. So there's no possible way Europe can produce any chemicals or any metals. And then we got Ukraine that's going to stop the grains, and then the whole, money switch. You know, the BRICS. I'm going to come back to it. BRICS. Their whole goal. I read some things on this white paper on what the BRICS currency is. You know, consolidated on 4 nations. They want to have remember back in the 1920s in America, we had gold certificates where you could go across the counter and put your gold certificate on for $20 of gold, and they would slide you a piece of gold across the counter. Literally, it was a bearer note. Gold certificate. That's what they're starting again. So citizens will have the access to physical metals across all these different nations that are backed by gold. This is where it comes in. When I was talking at the beginning of the show, you know, there's going to be many different pillars of this reset into a new monetary system, but it's got to collapse first. But the only way they'll ever get you to accept it is make you and your family starve. Then you'll do anything. You'll go digital. Hell yeah. So, Ransom, I know I'm rambling long there, but that whole balkanization of the entire world needs to happen. Like all the countries and allegiances and alliances need to shatter. And at the same time, the food needs to stop so everybody will accept the new monetary system. So when I say, like, where's the opportunity from here to there? And you shouldn't shake in your boots and go, I'm scared of all these stuff. No. You understand it, take it by the bull, grab it by the horns. Seriously, grab it by the horns because you understand what's coming. Like, how do you make it through at that point? And you should be rock solid making your plan to go through that. And where's the opportunity? Everybody's going to be a little different, so I don't have like a one-all-fits-all answer. So, Ransom, I don't know, maybe you could answer that question for me. Like, really, where do you see the opportunity in that?
I see the opportunity for people that have realized that this happens every so often. Putting aside any kind of conspiracy theories or, anybody's opinions on why or what is going on. The fact is that we know that there's, little cycles and bigger cycles of boom and bust, boom and bust, boom and bust. The only point here that I'm saying is the opportunity right now is for people that realize that they're transitioning and start preparing for a different kind of world, because that's exactly what the elites are doing right now. They're full full swing into this reset, and they really kind of show you exactly what they want to do by these think tanks, etc. That there's an origin of all of these stories and trends that go through the media. So like when they're always talking about robots or AI, I know that that's just telling me what the next phase of thing that they're going to tell me is reality. So first they propose the idea for to people for years at a time, and then they start slowly showing that it's actually possible. And then by the time that you're catching up, cognitively about all of these different trends and where they're leading, you're already caught in their weird net. And kind of I want to take you down a road that from just headlines that makes me think exactly that. So here is a kind of far-fetched article. I don't know, maybe it's not too far-fetched, but it's a study finds research in a nutshell article here. And it's talking about exactly how we've talked about, except for, we've talked about there being two different lines of mutation or speciation or the evolution of human into a new form. But it's kind of happening in real time. And here's a little thing that I thought was funny. I'm showing everybody a picture of their idea of the human form after, decades or hundreds of years of interacting with these devices and stuff. And it kind of shows this hunchbacked, bulbous head. And they talk about how they might have to get a inner eyelid, from overusing technology. And it's really a creepy version of the future, because basically what they're showing is a gray. It's a gray alien. It's a human, but they're morphing it into like the shape of a gray alien. But don't worry, that's just some of the get you used to the idea. Because let's skip over here to the real world and not fantasy. And this is the CEO of Nokia, and he's explaining by 2030 smartphones will be obsolete and we're not going to be using them, because they will be built directly into the body. And there's, I don't know, any number of sci-fi shows going on right now that's showing that exact thing. There's one called The Feed, where everyone's connected to the social media platforms, internet, etc. from birth, and they record everything. So it's like everybody's a TikTok star in their own minds. And that's kind of what's going on right now. Here's another article that just tells you the propaganda and the way that they're using the propaganda. The BBC tries to understand politics by creating a bunch of fake Americans that they use to go to the social media platforms and, voice opinions and write articles and share articles. So basically what they're admitting to is that they have a whole team of fake people and bots out there trying to sway the public over one way or another. And here's a report from InfoWars talking about them counting how many times MSNBC used the word fascist, 1,614 times, meaning that, they're trying to bombard you with an idea. And here's more to the balkanization process that's happening in the real time, in the real world. Government stats show 70% of all violent robberies in Paris carried out by foreigners. So, that's a very big number for any country for us, one demographic to be committing the crime. Here it is, another form of the balkanization in America. I'm sure you've been following the Twitter saga. So for a long time, they only give you leftists, and the leftists decide who can say what and what's true and what's not. Now there's a different opinion in there. You might have noticed they fact-checked the White House, and the White House had to take down one of their posts because it was a complete lie. And Elon Musk kind of messed with them by fact-checking them. But anyway, he's going to fire half of Twitter on Friday. So you'll have a new group of people deciding what you're allowed to say. But what's funny is if you check out the group of people that he's hiring to do this new job, it's the same group as the old group. It's all the people that want to shut down free speech, that want to ban people, that they want to turn off stuff. And newspapers across the U.S. are closing. And then here's some weird stuff that just to throw in there in the middle, talking about the Black Death survivors. Allegedly, they checked the genetics, and most of the people supposedly that survived the Black Death were people that had ailments that they were dealing with already, like chronic fatigue syndrome and Crohn's disease and other things that they had at the time, allegedly. And those people with those genetic markers lived through. it might make you think twice about, maybe changing your DNA now, that maybe some of your original DNA might be needed to, continue health. And here's some article here that I thought was bizarre, but it kind of shows you that they're getting ready to close down society. And the reason I say that is because of what
do
they're
you mean
doing.
close? Did you say close down society?
That's right. Close down society in the way that you're going to have to get used to less food, less products, less quality of products. So this is one of many states that's proposing this idea that you can no longer throw your garbage away if it's clothing, shoes, or bedding. And the reason for that is because they want to start forcing recycling of these products, with, if you think about it on its face, is somewhat disgusting. I'm sure that they'll recycle it and give you some nice stuff. And then they're pumping the fear about it's the same old things that are in the Bible. They got those 4 horsemen and they overplay them just to keep you totally distracted so that you can't keep track fast enough to what's actually going on. So they're going to pump this idea of everybody dying with viruses again. Here's Yahoo News. Scientists fear the new strains are more deadly, just like 2020. You can take that with a grain of salt. And then back to this idea of them balkanizing everything, and we could just roll through it. U.S. ready to protect Asian allies with nukes. So there, you can be scared about that. UK and EU to sign a new deal for quick troop movement and equipment movement across Europe. So they're staging for World War III. That's what that is. And brand new on the scene, more in new technology to add to the fear for everyone. Gigantic 70-foot nuclear fusion gun could change the world. They're already building in them and trying to get them on the battlefield. And I showed everybody a recruitment video. I want to play this while I it's in the background. It's from the government, so, they can't copyright it or nothing. But basically, this goes through all of the stuff we talk about. It opens up with the city crumbling to the ground and what appears to be tsunami waves approaching a little bit. And then we move to the battlefield that looks like somewhere in Europe. It's really green, grassy, with lots of trees. And they show the Marines coming up, and all of the birds turn into drones. And then after that, an EMP blows them all out of the sky. And then we shoot missiles and destroy more city. I mean, it's like everything's in there. They're showing you what the next stage of warfare is going to be. And guess what? Lots of AI, lots of technology. That's the main theme there. And destroying places with snow and pine forest. Where do you think that's at? That's most likely Ukraine and Russia, right? And then they show all their new toys that they're going to be blowing up ships out in the ocean. I mean, it's clear as day what they're projecting. And then meanwhile, in Russia, they're putting up billboards that are telling people they're going to be shot to death if they try to desert. So the fear is going from both sides. They're cranking this up, and it can only be really from some kind of singular intelligence that's directing all this to be in such unison. Vlad's barrage chilling most deranged Putin because he supposedly wanted to strike us. This is the third time. This is the third different suggestion that Vlad was about to first strike us. And it talks about their Operation Thunder World War III drills. And then it just goes on and on and on and on. The World War III has already effectively begun, according to Nouriel Roubini, a world-renowned economist, said the world is splitting into two, setting up. We got the Pentagon saying that we do have boots on the ground in the Ukraine, and this is the 101st right here, so they're known for the beginnings of war. But they say we're just tracking our weapons. Don't worry about it, And then let's move over here to what's really going on. Elon Musk claims that in this new winter of the war of drones, as they're calling it, Elon Musk is claiming that Twitter, that he just purchased, and remember, this is a guy that's all into AI, bots, and everything. He's saying basically that Twitter is a super complex AI system that's beyond human intelligence. And over here, just to sink it in for the Blade Runner idea, study finds man versus machine, AI narrowly beats out human scholar in test of scientific skill, because they are replacing all of the avenues of where you're going to get your information to these AI The AI is what's running everything right now, and there's no denying that. In the past couple of years, they've admitted that they write the headlines, that some of the presidential speeches are written by AI. They've admitted that AI controls our nuclear arsenal. They've admitted that they're deploying, and this is not just us, but also China and Russia are admitting to putting out completely autonomous AI platforms. And a lot of people don't realize that China is actually very far ahead in this game. They have entire islands built with nothing but AI going on under the ocean. So things are about to get collapsed. That's what I'm calling it. And then you got North Korea just out there, messing with everybody, shooting up their old school, ICBMs. And here's an article that I think sums it up: Unwinding of the New World Order. And this is a whole article claiming to the public that the New World Order is dead and that it needs to be rebuilt from the ground up because the entire thing has collapsed. And then we move to reality again. Here's a hedge fund giant. Elliott warns looming hyperinflation could lead to global societal collapse. So it's the same message from everyone. Meanwhile, there's, what was it, a 70% increase in homeless in California. Food banks across the country are barren, and food prices are skyrocketing, and diesel is about to run out. So I don't know. Is that an outlook of them not getting away with the Great Reset? Because it seems like they're getting away with it just fine. They've increased the incrementalism to the point where people can't keep track of it anymore. So if you weren't paying attention, and you're not now, I really feel sorry for you, because you're going to be up the creek without a paddle.
Yeah, it's the paying attention of everything. It truly is, because we can see how many different events are dovetailing right now. Like everything at the same time, it's an overwhelm. But keep that as a clue that that's how intense the food shortages are coming in, where the average person will be aware of the lack of food on the planet. There's really a ratio there, and I've been trying to, tag this in a term of the more the masses awake to what Ransom was just talking about, the food, the energy prices, everything going out of control, things stopping, economies stopping, fiat collapsing, all this is going to increase and intensify every single time there is a measurable, and I must say it, measurable, calculable loss of food production on the planet from a major food producer like Canada or Australia or Argentina or Brazil. So let me spin a tale about Argentina and Brazil. And this is exactly why you're going to watch something tick up this week. We've already seen a pretty big uptick. This week of information is pretty intense. Okay, I'll agree. But why is that happening? And I would say maybe even running into last week. So these 2 weeks are really intense, ramp up of all these things going out of control on the planet. In your face, in the news, every headline, it's falling apart, intensified. But what happened behind the scenes to drive that? Well, you're saying front page news narrative. You got to explain away the supply chain disruptions. Okay, that's an easy one. That's like low-hanging fruit. But why is the food not coming? Then you look at it in terms of supply chain. Well, why are the farm inputs not making it to those areas? And here's the question that nobody's asking. If the farm inputs like fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides did make it to those areas, would it even be able to grow the food when it got there if your temperatures are 2 degrees or 3 degrees or 4 degrees Celsius cooler than the last 30-year average? Or 5 degrees cooler in Uruguay and Paraguay Celsius? I don't care how much potash you have, DAP, You're throwing the ammonia underground, plowing when you're going, doesn't matter. Hybrid seeds won't make a difference. You literally can't grow it. Not enough. The temperature's the wrong temperature. Doesn't matter. And then you got all these soil moisture anomalies everywhere. It's either drought or it's too much rain. Like things are just rotting in the fields. And what's happening in Australia is there's so much rain coming down that the heads on the wheat that are still in the fields are starting to sprout. So if you want to sort of fermented grains a little bit, yeah, there you go. But in the real world, when you run that combine through there, they want dry, 10% moisture content wheat berries. That's what they want to get out. That's what you put in the bags. That's what you put on your ships. 10%. Not 100% plus, and the entire grain head sprouted out and starting growing green like their own little microgreens off the heads of the wheat. That's happening. In addition, they've confirmed that the third La Nina is happening in these last 2 weeks, which means there's going to be more drought for Argentina specifically is way heavier hit, and Brazil on the back end of that. Crop losses. But Brazil is the major importer of wheat from Argentina for processes for ethanol, animal feed. They can't get it this year because Argentina said, we just had one of the most massive droughts ever. We don't have any wheat. So Brazil's like, shoot, okay. We're only going to get like 10% of our normal allotment every year. Okay, we're going to go on the open market and look for it. But where do you look for it? You can't. There's nothing coming out of Ukraine. The entire EU's was in drought. They lost 35% of all their crops this year in the EU, just as a general for everybody knowing. That came out last week, too, that the original forecast for a 25% drop in grain production in Germany and 30% losses in France have now eclipsed that. And so when you're looking at Slovenia, Slovakia, Poland, Czech Republic, Austria, all these areas that are growing grains, if you look at it, take as an average, they're down 35% across the whole EU now. And you got the Ukraine cut off. But see, natural crop losses, see, that's it. This grand solar minimum crop loss event is in play. We're losing crops everywhere across the planet. We just can't grow it anymore. Naturally, we just can't feed 8 billion people at the current way we do it. If we had magnetic motors and we had electric gravitics and Tesla technologies and electro farming where you're putting a slight current through the seeds to create a higher yield, that sort of thing. If we did that, yeah, maybe we could. And everybody's got to grow food at home too. Everybody's got to do a victory garden, period. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You just not even a question. And what else is happening on the forefront? Oh yeah, the Mississippi River during these last 2 weeks has been confirmed that there will not be enough rainfall to raise the water levels to allow any of the stuck barges, which there are thousands and thousands of grain barges stuck, will not be able to get, they're going to rot right where they sit, basically. You got to put in mind there's 60 18-wheel trucks full of grain on every one barge. But there's thousands of those barges stuck out there, along the Mississippi. They're looking at April until it can unlock itself. So even if American farmers want to export, they can't get the grains down the river to Louisiana to export. And they can't get it out the St. Lawrence Seaway either through the Great Lakes because it's already frozen up because Nunavut, by the way, which is a sea point of the last glaciation of our planet, has sent out massive amounts of just unbelievable snow and ice. And it's beyond the 15-foot snowfalls that they had last year. It's already freezing waterways up there. So there's no outbound cargo. And even if you did get it out the St. Lawrence Seaway, what are you going to take it up into monstrous seas and ferocious storms off of Greenland and try to get it around somewhere else? I don't think so. So this is the problem we sit at. Like there's no grains really being exported, from America. There's still stockpiles coming in that can be loaded, but any new in addition gone. So Brazil's looking for grains. We can't export it. Argentina can't grow it. Ukraine's cut off. And we're looking at a 50% reduction because of the Tonga eruption in the southern hemisphere. And in the northern hemisphere, crop inputs are tripling and quadrupling for next year for fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides. You as a united, like the elitists, I'll call them the mother weffers, they have to distract from all that, because all that what I just described there is here now happening. Governments understand that, but they understand that you just don't know yet how much of a food crisis that's going to cause. They're ahead of you like 6 months in terms of understanding from today where we sit in the news media right now is what you sit and what you see those plans Ransom and I've been talking about moving forward. They see the food shortage getting that bad in 6 months that a lot of that will try to be implemented then to distract you. But at some point, they won't be able to distract anymore, and that distraction will turn to anger in the populace. Now, that anger in the populace is going to have to be crushed. And how do you crush it? Well, you crush the economy. I mean, literally to less than zero. You starve people, you get them on the digital rationing card. So as we march through now, these next couple of months, the grain harvest will be tallied in the next month and a half. They're coming in super lean. I mean, they've downgraded again on the USDA. They're down out in the 60%, high 60s. Of what their original percentage projections were about corn and wheat production across the United States and Canada. Minus 30+% on that too. So, you take that into consideration, and food being the number one thing that drives or allows a society to function. We are losing rapidly our food production globally based on a 400-year low in solar activity. Now you see how everything dovetails together so easily now. This whole carbon tax is nothing more than a guise to try to set up a new monetary system, blaming a natural cycle for the changes that we're seeing. So that's like two birds, one stone. And how many of these two bird, one stones do you see all around? Oh, carbon mitigation, carbon taxes, carbon offset credits. Oh, you can still do business, but you can buy an offset credit because Dave registered his forest. He didn't burn anything on his property, so you can burn stuff and still make corporate profits, but you're going to offset it in a carbon credit system, which is going to be part of the new monetary system. Two birds, one stone. Like you can see how easily this just lays out everywhere. So case in point again, I'll come back to it. Like how many times has this cycle gone on? Because I can't believe it's the first one that we've been through with the same kind of reset. Like who controls history in the past to show us our true history. So at the minimum, just from the food crop losses, we would lose 25% of the global populace based on past cycles. 15 would be a minimum. 25 to 30 would be where we would sit today. So you got to realize, just naturally, from this cycle from the sun going into a low solar activity phase, bending the jet streams, cloud cells, more cosmic rays creating more rainfall, we were going to lose 25% of the populace anyway because we couldn't feed them. Now the world kind of makes sense where they're going with all the distractions, why things are happening. It'd be a 25% loss anyway. Like really, you can't do anything about it. So these weirdo power people are going, well, the Petri dish would be 25% cleared out anyway. So how can we use that 25% cleared out and clearing out Petri dish anyway to make money? Because it couldn't survive anyway. It just can't. As the carrying capacity on the planet at best would be 75, 70, 60% moving forward. Like we can't grow enough food anymore. So Ransom, I rambled way too much, man. Sorry to keep you on the sidelines there.
No, that's cool. Actually, when I was actually reading USDA websites and the World Bank talking about food security and stuff, and like I'm reading that these are two intertwined, I don't know how do you put entities, I guess. They closely rely on each other for their information and what they're going to do. And it's like listening to a politician talk out of both sides of their mouth. So if you go to the USDA site, they're saying, don't worry about anything. Will there be food shortages is the question. And this is updated in October. Their answer, there are currently no nationwide food shortages, although some cases the inventory of certain foods at your grocery store might be temporarily low before stores can restock. Food production and manufacturing are widely dispersed throughout the U.S. and are currently no widespread disruptions reported in the supply chain, right? So they make it sound like, yeah, everything's fine, don't worry about it. But then you go over here to the World Bank, right? And I'm looking at their October 31st, 2022 latest update, talking about food security. And they are talking about, first paragraph talks about 80% inflation to all kinds of low income countries, right? Inflation levels of 84, 88, 93. Upper middle class income countries have seen inflations go up in just the past month for about 5%. It's entering double-digit inflations almost everywhere. The share in high-income countries with high food price inflation has risen 87.5%. And then we skip down here to production and prices, and they start talking about, it's 30% lower than it's supposed to be. It's 33% lower than it's supposed to be. 27% higher in price. 40% higher in price. 20% higher in price. So I'm just scamming through here at different stuff. And then I get down here to what I kind of wanted to talk about is I sent you an article on Skype, this is like their answer to people that were pointing out that there was this problem right here, what you're talking about upcoming food shortages. So in this article here, it says Russia rejoins UN deal to ship grain from Ukraine, easing food insecurity concerns. Now, that's great. That sounds great. It sounds like stuff's back on track. And then, I'm reading down here on the World Bank thing, and, it's talking about how everything's messed up because of this conflict, climate shock, and that if they don't get their deal back together of how many people are going to starve if they don't get this deal, which is they're talking about in this article from NPR about joining, rejoins the UN and dealing and shipping the grain. But over here it talks about, they're worried about, this is already printed. So this is what I think is a forecast of this deal. It says, but if the conflict increases, that they would be looking for an end to this collaboration, right? So, and then we would have food insecurity and inflation exacerbated by the last 2 years. And nowhere on here does it say, things are great. Every point that the World Bank, and this is the World Bank, think about that. Every place says disaster's coming.
Every place there's a World Bank location. Pretty easy to identify the problem there, isn't it? All right, we'll be back in a couple of minutes here. Ransom, Godwin chatting us through. I'm David DuByne, both of us here tonight. We're going to talk about opportunities as our society dissolves around us. We'll be back in a couple minutes. Please join us, and thank you for supporting us.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
What would it feel like to have your health and wellness in balance?
All disease is simply the improper replication of the DNA molecule. FCE, full chronic extract, when you grow the plant indoors with no contaminants, and then you get 120 cannabinoids, what that does for your telomeres and for your DNA is incredible. It is absolutely the best as far as being able to get your health back. A good phrase would be is there's no such thing as disease, just a lack of a good immune system. So if you can enhance your immune system, this is definitely the best way to do so. It's definitely the best thing from an immune system standpoint. If you take the position of, I just want to enhance my immune system, 120 cannabinoids is done through what's called the entourage and full plant extract compared to others that are out there and no contaminants. That's what's huge. So there's been tens of millions of dollars put into this and many people have had benefits from it type stuff. So this is about full spectrum and being able to get the entire benefit from the plant. This is the first time ever with a patented process to actually do that. if you take iron supplements, there's 4 different types of iron, and then the challenge is you have to have stuff that goes with it so the body will absorb it.
So this is a lot like when you take vitamin D so you can absorb the other vitamins. You kind of need the full spectrum of vitamins to get the benefit of each individual one.
Absolutely. And the thing that people notice the most is sleep. They have really, really deep sleep, and they sleep extremely well. And if they stop taking the product, then immediately their sleep is disrupted again. This is something that the Chinese and Egyptians and so on and so forth. So the research is more than just recent, it's extensive. So full plant extract, it's done indoors, aeroponics. Once you've got that, then you can get the full spectrum. People find that it resets their metabolism. So there'll be a lot of things that they're eating now, including sugar. It'll make it so that you will not desire to be able to consume the things that you're having challenges with. So wheat, dairy, sugar, all these different things. It'll balance your system so that it'll get you to the point where your metabolism is correct, and your palate, what you desire to eat, will change drastically.
The entourage effect is a proposed mechanism by which all the cannabis compounds interact exponentially in a synergistic manner to modulate the overall effects of the plant. The benefit of the entourage effect is the increase of the therapeutic experience. More compounds consumed in whole plant medicine typically means a higher likelihood of pain relief, anti-inflammatory action, anxiety relief, just to name a few. The endocannabinoid system, ECS, which is now being recognized as arguably the most important system in the human body, since it provides some degree of master control over all the other systems. In short, the ECS helps to balance many of our physiological systems and supports the body. The fact is, the ECS impacts just about everything, including appetite, immune response, calorie burn, pain and inflammation, and even cellular health. Its most important overall function is homeostasis, which basically means that it helps to keep the body in a healthy balance.
The change is coming up in the food pricing and the inavailability of medicines because China has shut off the spigot for base chemical materials to produce our antibiotics. A lot of things are going to shift, and having something that's produced in the United States that seems it covers 2 different arenas.
All right, thanks for listening while we take that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. David DuByne right here with Ransom Godwin. We're going to kick you off on hour 2. But before we do, thank you, Revolution Radio, for allowing us to broadcast and use this as the seed point for many locations we're kicking off to tonight, especially Rumble. Join us over there. Mini Ice Age Conversations. Also, the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast YouTube channel, Mountain High TV YouTube channel. We're up on Twitter as well as Facebook. So show some love, hit the likes, and also show some love to Revolution Radio by supporting. Like these things Ransom and I talk about, it's borderline on the channels now, on my YouTube channel, it's borderline. Every time I do a video talk about this, they're slapping a warning under it. It's something, it's global warming, it's from the United Nations, it's from this, there's no that happening, there's plenty of food production, it's this. Every time I make a video talking about such good things, there's always some sort of, no, we're the authorities, don't listen to this crazy guy tell you his stuff. Warning under the videos. Rumble not, Odyssey not, Vigilante TV not. Thanks for streaming with us tonight. But remember, freedomslips.com donate tab. Let's make some historic pirate rum to start us off here, Ransom. Wanted to, a lot of people ask me during this time when things are sort of shrinking or collapsing or freezing up or super gluing in place right now, the world balkanizing in super glue. The entire world's balkanizing in super glue is probably the best way to describe what's happening. What's some skill sets that you could really have and use, and beyond obviously gardening, growing food, saving seed, that sort of stuff? Okay. Woodworking would be one. And Ransom, I was hoping you could add on to my list. I'm going to give 3 and then see if you think they might work. So woodworking for sure. Repair of motors would be for sure a number 2. And number 3, which I've just gotten deeper into, I've delved into it before, but I just took off the deep end here. Turning corn or fruit into alcohol. So you can then have your medicine, and you can also have something as a tradable, and then you can keep the best in the run and the hearts for yourself, for like your favorite taste of the alcohol. So you get your best of your best to share. You trade the rest, part of it's medicine. So I'm just looking at these types of skills as we move through, because there's a lot of opportunity, but people are still going to want the basics, because if you look back through time, what's always been tradable? Even during the Revolutionary War, what was tradable? Whiskey. It was currency. So anything else that's drinkable is going to be currency during the time. So I'll just leave it there. Ransom, thanks for joining for the second hour. How's it going?
Good. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I've been looking into, is just how do you do every single thing without the benefit of civilization, basically, because that's what we're talking about. Almost everything that we do nowadays is lined up with a kind of a lackadaisical, easy life. We have heating, we have cooling, we have refrigeration, we have endless supplies of toilet paper, depending on which emergency is happening. But our lives, for everyone, including the very poor in the United States, let's face it, even the very poor are living in a pretty good living standard right now. And I kind of wanted to get into that because, when the food starts being shut off and people don't notice, it's not like there's just going to be absolutely zero to eat, right? It's not going to be overnight where they just decided that every single grocery store is empty. And even though they supposedly only have like a 3-day supply for the population in the area that they're in, we know that's not really true, because, if you even live in an area that snows once in a while, you'll know that if they put snow storm on the news, everybody will go to the grocery store. I used to work in grocery all the time, and every single time a small, idea of a disaster, possibly, everybody would go overbuy a bunch of stuff, and the things that they picked would never be the correct choices for somebody that's going to go home and possibly be without power. And speaking of that, that was, I think, around 2000, if you remember, possibly, there was some severe ice storms moving through Arkansas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, that area, where like every single thing out there was covered in like a good couple of centimeters in ice, like everything, the trees, the leaves, every grass blade, the roads. I mean, like everything. The power was out, and within the second night, there were ATVs and trucks without license plates and things like that robbing all the convenience stores, because the police and the emergency services couldn't respond fast enough to the areas, because they just weren't equipped to do that. However, all of these, let's call them good old boys in the area, people with, that live in the woods, people that had things that they could just drive around on the ice, no problem. They were robbing everything. And this is only 2 days into it, in a time when the economy was relatively good. Things were cheap. And so we're coming into this time where things are going to start running out. And you're gonna notice, Uncle Fred and somebody's grandpa keeled over. And speaking of which, heart attacks are really prevalent nowadays. But for for a couple of years now, it seems like people that were dying for some reason or another kind of got put into the wrong category, at least as the cause of death. I'll put it that way. So when the food isn't really available and the lower class and the middle class are not eating the same amount of calories that they used to, they're going to start dwindling in health, which means necessarily that probably they're going to get sick a little more often and, fatigued more often, and all around health starts to go down with less intake, especially if you're used to a steady diet. So all of a sudden people are going to be dying. They're going to be dying of, so-and-so got a cold, they died. So-and-so had a heart attack, they died. They had a gut problem and they died. And you're going to start hearing a lot of this happening for one reason in particular, that it's not recognized really when people start dying of starvation in the way that they're not starving like in a country where they just got cut off with zero amount of food. They're going to have a little amount of food. So this is a process that's going to happen to people. And unfortunately, because we live in this post-industrial world here, we have very commercialized food-like stuffs in the first place. And even if you're trying to eat good, at least out of the grocery store, out of these box chains, you think you're going, well, I eat the chicken sandwich with a Diet Coke. I'm sorry, but there's just not much nutrition in there already. So we're already dealing with a populace that's probably and most likely under nutrition is under what they should be doing. So they're all malnourished already. And a lot of people are obese right now. I mean, if you check the stats, most people are not very tall and they're pretty big around. And they're not healthy, so they're already at risk for all of these other health conditions that, won't really be the cause of death, is what I'm saying. Just like before, other people were kind of put in the wrong category. When it comes down to it, they're going to have all of these people dying for various health reasons. But everybody knows that your health starts in your gut. And I'm not just talking probiotics. I mean, the stuff that you put in your gut turns on and off these little markers, the epigenetics of your body. And, some of them tell you that you're not going to have cancer. Some of them tell you that you are. So if you're eating a malnourished diet of depleted food already, and then the rations, that's what I'm calling them, the amount of food that you're going to start eating at your home is less, which we've already heard about that. People skipping meals. A lot of people are saving money. They're not buying the vitamins that they usually buy. Across the board, people are kind of pulling back out of the commercial market instead of, like what we're talking about is kind of prepping essential goods for the long haul, having lots of food stored so that you can be, fully functional during bad times. There's going to be millions. I'm going to go ahead and say hundreds of millions, at least in our country alone, that are not going to have the energy, the mentality, or any of these health areas in a good place. And we, the people that have been thinking ahead, the people that have been dealing with life and saving back and getting prepared, even if it was just a little bit, even if you just know what you're going to do when things go that way, that's the first mental preparation. But then you have to start putting things in action. And it doesn't take long to do one or two things every single day. Like if you had a list of things that you needed to prep, like we were talking about last week, and you knew exactly how much food and a formula that you needed to stack back, obviously you're not going to go buy all of that unless you're super rich right at one time. However, while things are semi-stable, other people don't know the nutrient-dense products to buy that you can still buy and still store. So slowly, certain people can start stockpiling, and they won't be in that demographic of people that are not only physically unhealthy, but mentally unhealthy, because that's the more important part there, right? When people don't have the proper nutrition, their mental state is messed up. They start acting crazy. And we've been seeing more and more of this, and being a newsie or a headline searcher, I've been seeing the most bizarre activity I've ever heard of that man is doing. And we don't need to get into that, but just to say that people are already in a state a fear of confusion about what's going on worldwide. And then the last piece to the scenario, to completely break their backs, to completely break the will of the people, you start malnutrishing them. And I brought this up many times. These are the first stages of an invasion, but this one's being done with suits and ties. They're just changing the formula of business. And as you said before, it seems like, if you didn't believe in patterns, that all of this stuff is coincidentally happening at the same time. The food problems, the medical problems, the war problems, and maybe nature having some issues itself, all lining up to the same time. So I'm going to say that this is exactly the plan that they're doing, and they know what they're doing, and they're slowly creating a society of crazy people, and at the same time, feeding them full of pharmaceutical drugs that alter the brain, and also simultaneously a full spectrum attack. They're making the populace malnourished. But don't worry, when the food starts running out in the grocery stores, or there is food in the high-end grocery stores, but they're blocking it with armed guards because everybody's been doing flash mob riots and theft, there will be limited places to buy food, right? So people are going to go to what? They're going to go to the billionaires for help. And this includes the box store food chains, Taco Bell, Kentucky Fried Chicken, etc., all food-like stuff. And this is going to be the nutritional diet. They've already been promoting ideas in New Mexico about allowing the food stamp program that's designed to help poor people go to the store and buy food to feed their family. They're pushing the idea that now they can buy hot food, go to the convenience store and buy those overpriced, like burritos and stuff like that. So basically, the entire civilization is being trained to eat tiny little rations with no nutrition in it, at an exorbitant price. But in their minds, it's cheap because when they go to the grocery store, they can't picture paying $20 for a medium-sized steak, or $8 for a pound of ground meat, or $7 for a gallon of milk. And then we get into this crazy situation where gasoline, diesel, milk, water, toilet paper, and all of these things become about of equal value and necessity. That is a complete collapse of society, because people are willing to do violent things over little stuff. So after you've got an entire civilization of people that are malnourished and mentally ill, and then you take away their living conditions, it's like if you had a prisoner and you just decided to go in and take their bed and take their toilet out and then see what happens after that. Well, obviously the person being forced to live in those animal types scenario is going to start acting like an animal. And the same thing is true with people. They're forcing them into an irrational state as far as culture, an irrational state as far as actual mental health, and then the nutrition. And I don't think people are going to be noticing the food disappearing until it's so bad that it's just not there. And hopefully the United States, because I think that we'll be the last domino to fall in this plan that they have. And the reason for that is because they know that here in America, if we really got our head out of our butt, we could start right now and be self-sufficient within, I would say, a year or 2 years, and already have a manufacturing center started to build up. So we know that's possible, but how are you going to do that when everybody's distracted with rumors of war and financial desperation and, who shot Nelly in the belly with the meatball kind of scenario that we got going on with Congress? Think about all of the arguments that they actually give the public. None of them really involve feeding your family. None of them involve bettering yourself as a human being. None of them. All of the programs are designed to, totally crush the progress made in civilization. And that's all by design. There's no accident here. This is the plug that they're pulling. But the benefit of knowing all of this is that we don't have to participate. There are enough people out there that are smart enough and have common sense to start living like their ancestors just 2 generations ago, and start saving and start growing and start building theirself. Think about how the construction industry is now. When my grandfather's time, they'd build a house out of scratch. They would go to the hardware store, They'd buy whatever tool they needed, whatever supplies they needed, and a house would be up in a couple of days, whether it was rock masonry or it was, regular wood carpentry. But today it's so commercialized that almost no one knows how to repair their own home, despite having places like Home Depot and Lowe's. You can't go there and get an answer too. These are the people selling it to you. If you need help, you rarely get help from them. You have to know what you're doing and figure it out. And then on top of that, they've designed the entire repair industry to not fit 5 years ago. So if you have plumbing issues or air conditioner issues, you're going to run into these problems where they no longer make those old parts at those sizes and those fittings and those lengths. They have a whole new system so that you have to repair everything from scratch. And they know that people don't have that kind of money. So they know that they're going to milk the people with money, and then everybody else is going to continue down the degradation path. And I know you've noticed that around the country, nice neighborhoods that were previously middle class, and those places had gardens, and they had civilization was pretty nice for the people that live in those neighborhoods. Now they're ghettos. Now they're full of Uber Eats and people getting robbed and cop on every corner, but yet still they can't seem to quell the crime rates. And this is where we're going. Now, just put this last piece in there, which is a shortage of food. And you can see that that is the catalyst for their great reset and civilization collapse.
You said, excuse me, previously, when the food runs out, where are they going to run to? Well, they're going to run to like the Taco Bells or something because that's all they know. And wait a second, scratch the record, stop. When you were talking, my mind went to, I thought the very next thing you would say was these people would go to the countryside to find a farmer. But that's not. You went in the other direction where, think about that. The city folk are going to go to what they know is only supermarkets, only like fast food restaurants, only that. Where my mind was completely the other direction, where I was not even thinking of those as an option. I was only thinking going out here in the countryside and ordering another lamb for having a farmer to grow, to raise a lamb through the next 6 months. And then we take it. I'll tell you the craziest story, because we went to this pumpkin festival. It was an old farm. So any of you out there listening in the countryside, you're going to understand this. Now, back in the 1950s, the farms, or one farmer would get together and bury some big, huge pipes that they would use to have for drainage across roads and put some slides in there for the kids. And they'd use all the stuff that's at the farm, but just turn it into a playground for a while. And then they would have a pumpkin festival there with cider and all kind of stuff. And it became the place to go because that farmer did it every year. Well, we went to one of these, and they even had this corn maze where it was a good 5 acres of corn, very solid 5 acres, it's tall. But they cut a maze through there, and they make all these backtracks. You get lost all the time. It takes 2 hours to go through the thing. But that was here. And the most crazy thing was we wanted to get some pumpkins because they had these blue type of pumpkins. And girl at the counter was like, hey, if you buy any pumpkins, we'll give you a pound of ground beef from our new butchery, because they raise cattle. So they opened a store next to them that was just for meats. So you bought a pumpkin for $6, big, huge, and barely even hold this thing. It almost takes 2 people to lift it up. Super giant pumpkin, obviously 20 plus pounds, more for $6 for a blue one. And then they give you a pound of ground beef just for buying a pumpkin. See, when he talked about the ground beef prices going up to astronomical things, I'm like, whoa, why you go to your farmer? They butcher their own cattle out there. They process it into everything, ground beef. They weren't open at that day, so I don't know exactly what the price is for ground beef, but for sure it's going to be way, way, way better quality than anything you can find in a Costco or a Sam's or a Walmart or a Piggly Wiggly or a Kroger or wherever you're going to shop. It's going to be way better quality, seriously, 10x better. Because they love the animals when they're raising them. You never want your animals to suffer, ever. Anytime an animal's suffering, you're on it like a nurse on top of that thing. Come on, get back to health. You don't want to see your animals suffer. Like even chickens are laying eggs, they're friendly. They're like, oh, sorry, chicken got packed in, fighting or whatever. Oh, we'll get better quick. You always need to go to the farm source for your food, because when it ends up in your supermarket, you've already stepped back 2 or 3 steps to where that food came from. Whether it be like that sweet corn that you finally get wrapped in a pack, and like a Kroger that's wrapped up and it's 4 pieces in cellophane and on the bottom thing and all that. They're like 3 or 4 steps away from the farmer where you could have got that for 25 cents an ear. Fresh that day, picked. Not 2 or 3 weeks later, shrink wrapped in some plastic. But going to get it directly from the farmer. Pumpkins, chickens, goat, sheep, cow. We bought a 490-pound calf last year from the Amish guys. They raise all these different livestock, so whatever you want, you will say, all right, in 2 months, you have like 10 lambs out here. Okay, in 2 or 3 months, they're going to be this size, this weight, and we want to buy one of those. And they'll raise it up for you. And you're paying live weight because it's still a live animal, right? And you could take it to your farm as a live animal, or you could have them slaughter it for you, and then you can take it home and butcher that out, which is just pennies, literally pennies compared to what you buy in any supermarket. Oh my gosh. Like when you're trying to weigh out all the meat in an animal, whether it be a lamb or whether it be a pig or a cow, like when you look at the price of, say, a T-bone steak, I mean, after you have a whole animal, you're like, no, that costs, just to have the T-bone steaks, 2 of them, when there's 8 of them on the animal, cost you a quarter of the price of the animal if you buy those T-bone steaks, like, you know, for a party pack or something that you're going to get. You could get a whole animal for a quarter of the price of those party packs for T-bones and stuff. Oh, it's crazy. So you need to step back to your farmer. And I'm not talking about farmers markets either, because they're super expensive. Back to the farm itself. Like even out here where I live, I consider it in the middle of farming country. Those people who go sell at the weekend markets, they got to box your stuff up, spend hours moving out, getting over to the farmer's market, spending their whole day there to buy it, spend their time, you know. So for them, it's really like a day and a half, and how much they make, a couple $100, good ones, $500 sometimes. But then you had the time for to grow your whatever produce, take it there, spend the time. They're willing for you to come out to their farms now to save that cost because gas is getting expensive. They don't want to do that. They understand that food's becoming so valuable. And I went to this preparedness conference last week. I was invited by because I have the channel, and they said, hey, there's a bunch of people here selling long-term storable foods, running courses on wild foraging. You know, come by and take a look at what it is. They had some podcasting going on there too, and people were explaining about gold money. Actually, you know what, I'll tell you. We got in the conference there, and they gave you one what looked like an old gold certificate from the 1930s, like I talked about, put it over the counter, get your gold. But that was redeemable for one of the new, hold on a second, gold bags. I'd never seen one before in my whole life. But one of those paper things was redeemable for an actual 1,000th of 1 ounce of gold, like lasered, printed onto a paper. And I thought, wow, there's actual real physical gold inside this piece of note that you just traded me for a piece of paper. I digress, though. Everybody there was connected deeply into their farm communities, and everybody there would have had completely enough food with the shared skill set of medical preservation on how to preserve foods, how to wild forage foods, and then how to change that into a possible medicine. And I'll leave it there. Because when I'm looking over here on the Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast channel, I'm reading a few of the comments. It says, Dave, correct, about 50% may be food production in the world this year. This is from Ancient But Still Here, which is funny because I was talking about stills earlier. And Jackie Alley, too, says, population decline from the Great Experiment, 50%. That'll leave plenty of food. But see, it all comes back to, are you going to be terrified because the food stops? Are you going to have a second and third source so you know you got food, and your contribution to that community is high enough that they would always give you first before everybody else? And then third, what do you have that you could trade into that community that's not money that would be tradable? Because my mind is blown wide open. I did not know the value. Truly, I understood it this year, like last year. It's like I bought this still, and it was for distilling water mainly, because if you come into an emergency situation, you can take the dirtiest water, as long as it's not super chemical ridden. You could take dirty water and you can distill it, run it through a couple filters, and what's left is, you wouldn't want to drink it, but after you distill it and turn it above 212 and it boils and it rolls out the coil and it recondenses, you can live on that for, days or a week or so of just that. So for me, I'm thinking, all right, man, I want to get a still so I can distill some water. And then secondly, I was like, all the natural medicines now, dude, we got all kind of flowers growing. Dude, seriously, fields where you just walk through and you get hundreds of pounds of these flower heads if you want them. And if you get the right kind of flower head, and I'll do a famous example of lavender, then you can do the same thing, and you can distill the oil out as it rolls through the coil. You can take that vapor from the plant, releasing the oils, and then recondense that down into what they call, I wouldn't say tinctures even, it's more like essential oils. So for me, the whole thing about the still was always, got to have one so you can create your own clean drinking water. Must. Pot still, you got to learn how, even if you don't have a pot still, you got to learn how to make one so you can make clean drinking water to get you through an emergency for 3 or 4 days, 5 days. You're going to have to add some salts and stuff in it, because you've actually evaporated it out where it's so pure that there's nothing in it except water. So you'll have to maybe add some sugars and salts back in it to, your electrolytes keep you going. But if you have that basic skill, damn, you could keep making water for people for days. That is a valuable tradable skill set, to even have that thing or know how to make that device to be able to distill water in an emergency to give people fresh water out of dirty water, even if it's not off a spring. You could still run down to the river or the closest creek that's not, super polluted, where you pick it up and you see some kind of stuff floating in it, whatever. Okay, you're going to filter that. Water's pretty clear. Boiling it, you distill that stuff. Free wood everywhere. If it comes down to it, man, just burn the crap out of wood all day long. Have everybody running around grabbing wood. Look for the dry wood, bring it. We'll just keep boiling. We're going to make water. More wood you bring, the more fresh water for everybody to drink. There's an equation there too. The amount of wood that you bring to make a fire, to make that thing boil, the more you can distill out on the backside. So you're looking at water, like firewood equals fresh water in an emergency. Like, you can't live off distilled water. Please understand that. It'll definitely keep you alive for days, but you're going to need to add sugar and salt back into that. So this whole distillation thing here too. And then on that front, besides making the essential oils, which I've never seen plants boiled down and distilled where only the oils, and there's a whole temperature range chart where whatever oil you want to extract from, like goldenrod, or if you want to extract from wild lettuce, or if you want to extract from lavender, there's different temperature ranges where these oils will suddenly come into a vapor state. You're boiling the oil off at a different temperature. So if you have a hot plate, you can program that temperature in the hot plate to stay at like 167. And you can boil all those methanols off of all your batch. And then once the still stops running, it's 100%. There's nothing else that's in there because it just stopped. So there's no other oils or any other evaporatives that can come out, whether it be acetone or methanol or whatever. It just can't come out. It's already reached the boiling point for all those low-grade nail polishy things. It's all out. There's no more left. And after 10 minutes of nothing left, and you're like, okay, let's turn it up a little bit. What boils out next? Not boiling water, but boiling compounds in that. And I watch these guys move through the temperature ranges and take each individual part of the ethanol out. and these different flavors on different temperatures. Like 189 to 190 was where this perfect, like, grape flavor came out of the grappa. Because whatever it got boiled out of that solution at that temperature, whatever boiled in that entire mash of like 5 gallons at 189 degrees Fahrenheit, ethanol's boiling out, which is alcohol, but then these flavors boiled out too into this perfect mix. I mean, it was the most incredible. So you can do it every way across. You can program your temperatures. You can use a gas burner. You can use wood, whatever, make fire. You can get water. Like, these are the kind of things and skill sets that I think I got on a super tangent here. Yeah, there's going to be 50% of the people left. Jackie Alley too, right here on YouTube on the Mini Ice Age Conversations. But again, on Revolution Radio, talking about the Missouri boat ride. That's Gorizillan Matrix 6. Talking about the Missouri River boat ride. That was in one of the Clint Eastwood movies where, you know, boat of people chasing him were coming by, and they were all connected by one rope, and he shot the rope, and then the entire boat just floated downstream. But see, that Missouri River connects to the Mississippi River, which is where all the river boats were. And all the music and the gambling and all the gunfighters and all that stuff from the 1800s. That had been dredged by the Army Corps of Engineers for a long time. Super deep. 150 years of making that river deeper. So bigger barges and more cargo can move up and down it. But nature has thrown a loop where everything we've done in the last 150 years to make that river more passable for bigger and bigger and bigger boats stopped. It doesn't work anymore. All the human ingenuity in 150 years is now being met by nature, and it has stopped. So, you know, these whole things about the linear concept of time, of how we invented invention A, B, C, and then we sit here now. The river itself is no match for humanity. It'll tell you what it wants to do. We think we can dredge or dig out things deep enough for boats to run. What about the side tributaries that go? And I saw these amazing images of something that's carrying 60 18-wheelers full of grain just kind of tipped on their sides, all stuck in the mud. Because I'd gone fishing down in South Carolina before, and then the tide went out, and it was very much the same thing. Like, everything was just stuck in the mud on the sides. Then the water would come back in and everything floated again. It was cool. But they can't even load the corn or the wheat anymore because the side channels going into like ADM facilities it's too shallow. They can't even get a boat in. Even on the bottom of the channel, they can't even drag it with chains and winches, and it's just too stuck, literally in the mud. I was reading all about this. Like before, if the water level was incredibly low, they would still winch the vessels in and out. We're talking massive kind of winches here. We're not talking about a hand crank thing to pull your boat up onto your trailer so you can drive it away. We're talking like 20-foot flywheels in circumference there to try to, you know, move these cables that would winch the vessels in. And it was like a slurry of mud, and really, it was like muddy water, but they just couldn't use the propellers to get up in there. Well, there aren't really any on the barges, but there is for an emergency. They have this little tiny one on the bottom. But they would winch those things. Before, they would just kind of float them in and out, and they would just float. But in the low water times before, this was a thing that's happened. So they winched them in and out. But where we sit right now, because I'm talking about the Missouri River boat ride, the mud is so thick and so deep that our biggest machines in the world right now to move giant cargo in and out through, it's not working anymore. It's too muddy. It's too thick. There's not enough water. It's drying out. The boat can't even be pulled up with the biggest machines we have in the world to pull boats through mud and like slurry water to get them up to docks and things. Like, that equipment's not working anymore either. That's how big this event is. So our machines aren't big enough now to pull our delivery vessels through what nature threw at us. Plus, the water on the entire biggest river in the entire United States is so low that after 150 years of clearing that, it's still not enough. And we're expected to get farm inputs into the Mississippi River, like the fertilizers, the herbicides, the pesticides, going up on the same barges that should be going the other direction inbound from Louisiana up to like Missouri. That entire corridor is broken down. They can't bring anything in. They can't run it on rail either because rail capacity is diminished by 20% across the U.S. and Canada and Mexico. So whatever's happening, this food shortage is big. And you could talk all day long about geoengineering and all this type of thing, and I get it. I really do get it. Ionospheric heaters, the amount of cosmic rays are dumping a huge amount of different, let's say, ion-accepting nanometals into the atmosphere. And you can look at it two ways. It's either cosmic radiation management, or it's geoengineering, or it's a combination and some sort of percentage of both. Because the metals they're putting up there, nanoparticulates, are absorbing the charge in advance of further down in the atmosphere, what would be water droplets picking that up in a supercharged fashion, and instead of it being like 1 micron across, it would suddenly turn into like 20 microns across. And that would be the beginning of your storm. So like that's a 20x increase in the storm. You could throw the nanometals up there, the cosmic rays come in, they hit, they nullify, not every one of them by any means, shape, or form, not even close, but at least a percentage of, because when they collide with the metal, they lose their charge, so they can't really have it there's no more charged particle to run deeper into the atmosphere and then collide with something and then increase its ionic uptake. It nullifies the charge, so it's not a cloud builder. Right, so these nanoparticulates that we're all talking about, that we've all heard about, those nullify cosmic ray charge inbound, so they don't create a cloud droplet that will rain out somewhere downstream, which, at least from the Harvard and who else was putting out reports there? Cambridge and was it York University in conjunction? There was Australia as well. There were like 5 or 6 different major universities across 3 continents that put this research together with all these the sickest links. If you like to chase links onto data, man, this is the sickest report they've ever put out. It went into electric geology, electrocosmology, and then how all this worked onto cosmic rays increase rainfall by 7x across the planet. But they put it in the whole electric universe style of, it's not just plasma, it's not just a particle. Everything has to be electrified for this system to even deliver that charge down into the cloud layers. Like, it's got to be all electric before it even gets to that point. And that was the coolest thing about all the research. They finally admitted that it's all electric, that everything has to have an electric charge to carry the next whatever wave form down into the deeper layer. So is it really geoengineering, or is it to stop a 7x cloud build? Right, right now I would believe we probably have about a 1 to 2x increase in cloud layering from 18,500 to 23,000 feet. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, if the cosmic radiation management was not done, also known as geoengineering, where then they can throw a frequency in that, or that's a different thing to control hurricanes. I'm just talking in general. Throwing nanometals around the entire planet to absorb some of that in cosmic ray increase, instead of it being a 7x increase, it's been sort of reduced down to a 2x increase in rainfall. If they were to stop the programs, perhaps it would ramp up to a 5 again. So now, Ransom, the last thing I'm going to say, because the reason I was so long-winded with that, I'm trying to bring it back to the point of, if this geoengineering were to stop, and we suddenly see, like we did during the COVID time, clear skies pervade the planet, not even a single streak that then expands out after the airline passes, then that cloud layering would increase by another 5x on top of that, which would mean, a 2x increase now, where in Australia, they're getting a year's worth of rain in a day for 5 weeks in a row. each week they had a different event with a year's worth of rain in a day. They got 5 years worth of rain in 5 weeks there. That would go to 35 years worth of rain in a single storm. Now you have to ask yourself, okay, this has been going on for some time. The technology's there, the understanding there, the mathematics are there to put those same metals in and then heat them and then cause clouds to bend around the heating, or, you know, further evaporate higher into the atmosphere with that same heating, and then create a storm further down. You can bend the storms around where you want to put the heat, or you can cause them to collapse in on each other. There's many different ways. You can cause them to evaporate around that field and then come back down on the backside. The outbound current flow on our planet was already doing that over the Oblast region in Russia. It's one of the largest oat producing regions. So if you're following the red sprites, the blue jets, and the ELF electrofrequency events at high altitude, like 100 miles into the atmosphere, those round elves, which is like round plasma donuts, are centered over a region where they're growing crops. And naturally, the weather patterns are bending around those outbound current flows that are getting more intense because our sun's magnetic field stepping down. Earth needs to equalize, so it needs to send more energy out of the system. And they do that. I mean, we're connected to the sun, but it's doing that through these like Hall currents that exist in our crop growing zones. So if one of those Hall currents amplifies and intensifies an electrical output, there's a higher charge around it, so suddenly weather systems are going to pass around that. And that was one of the things that was talked about. When these current flows increase outbound, they get droughts in those areas. So here's another thing I would like to bring to the attention of everybody. Like where you're experiencing a drought, you should also be experiencing radio communications blackouts, scattery kind of cell phone signals, internet not working correctly, and yourself not being able to sleep correctly. Like you slept at a certain sleep pattern for, 20 years of your life, and then suddenly it's totally disrupted where you're getting up in the middle of the night, you're going to bed super late, you're sleeping in super late, but you're still up the same amount of hours. These kind of things, weird, twisty. There's more electricity coming out of that flow. So you're in one of those zones where the outbound current flow is coming out of the planet, outbound. So once you start to map those out on GIS software, then you can start to see that there's a massive amount of disruption across the central U.S. There's also a lot of disruption right over in that southwestern part of Russia. Also, the crop growing zones there. And you see it in Canada, and you see it in Australia. You see it in South America too, the South Atlantic anomaly. Like I encourage everybody out there to look at SWARM, which is a satellite measurement to map the Earth's magnetic field. So they know where it's super intense and they know where it's almost nothing. And the maps are super easy to read. The more intense the field is, the more yellow it is. And outside that, it'll be red. And where there's zero magnetic field, it'll be black or dark purple. And that's on the southern hemisphere. So you're not really looking at the southern magnetic anomaly as just a magnetic field map. What you need to do is encircle those circles, and that is the magnetic field line coming out of the planet. There it's going inbound. See, it's coming into the Earth there. That's why it's so weak. But the outbound flows are getting super intense because the Earth's overcharged. Like there's really very little current coming in from the sun any longer. We're coming into this low in solar activity in 400 years. So the inflow from that South Atlantic anomaly is incredibly low. It's in the like I say, blacks and dark purples. There's no inflow really. You wouldn't expect it to be. We're going into a 400-year low in solar activity. But the outbound flow is where it's still overcharged in the crust. Like there's current riding through those aluminum, composites across the planet. there's current running through that iron ore deposits across many places in the world, and those are all connected to the gold veins and the silver veins and the zinc veins and all these things that are running through the crust of the planet. Our planet has a ton of metals in it, like really just, it's just fully electrified. It's like different sizes and thicknesses of metals that would allow current to flow. So think about the Earth as a capacitor. Okay, that inbound flow is really low. It's not going to blow back out because it's coming in the same direction. So it's going to go out elsewhere. It's going to discharge outbound. And that's where I'm saying those drought areas are the outbound discharge, which is becoming more and more and more and more and more pronounced, where you can actually map it now, versus the current inflow, which is way down in the southern anomaly. Now it's almost consolidated in one giant area. And that's the scariest thing. Like the entire southern hemisphere is consolidated into that one giant round magnetic field line in the southern hemisphere. It used to be like 6 or 7 of them. Now it's congealed all into just one. Like all the other 6 disappeared into just one giant inflow current now. But in the northern hemisphere, there's all kind of currents going outbound to try to equalize that. Russia, Ukraine, United States, Canada, and Australia, and Brazil. And then suddenly we have all these crop losses, and they're trying to explain it away because the supply chains broke down, because the economy thing, because of the Russian war, because of the Ukraine. Now, they can't tell me that all that syncs together and somehow it's not related, and they're deflecting from all the. Like I can explain to you why the crops are being lost. Why is the news not telling you to grow gardens? Excuse me, because we're coming into these same times where you're going to need to grow your own food. So Ransom, I rambled like way too long. Please, take us out for the show here. Thank you for joining tonight.
Yeah, I was going on the trip with you there with all the way from the river being, messed up and the way that the food's not getting to where it's going. And then I was sitting there thinking, by spring or late winter, they're going to be crying about how the Mississippi is flooding. And because of the flooding, they can't do this or that, right? So they're going to...
Oh, wait, stop. Wait, I'm sorry to stop you. Can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. Oh, my gosh. Okay, so Ransom just threw this thought onto me here that because there's so much dryness right now, because the river is so low, what they're doing is choosing to take all the grain off all the barges and put it on the sides of the Mississippi under tarps. Right now, this is the biggest thing in industry to move your machinery around, to be able to offload off of one of those barges that carries 60 18-wheelers full of grain and get that to move it onto land into a centralized area where then they put under tarps. But they put a little bit, probably like a 6-foot tall barrier of concrete around it, and then they load it in there and then just cover it with tarps. You just get it. If it's going to flood, all the stored grain along the Mississippi will be flooded. Damn.
Be ruined, wouldn't it?
Completely ruined. No, you don't get it. That's the entire destruction of the entire food supply. You just get it right there. When do you think that would start? Like February, March, April?
Yeah, well, I'm just figuring, it has cycles of flooding and drying, and it's not hard to look at those cycles. So when they know it's drying, they know that necessarily the way flooding works is the drier it gets before it floods, the less water absorbs into the soil and the more pushes off to the sides, right? So just like in the desert, every time we have a drought for several years and then we get a good monsoon roll in here, there's just massive flooding everywhere. Everybody acts like they've never seen it before and can't figure out why it's happening. It's because of the drought previous to the flood. And think about that too in California. California grows a lot of stuff too, and not being the river, but the same scenario. When they finally start getting a lot of rains, they're going to be complaining about mudslides and how the water ruined the crops. And even though they were drought stricken, the water's going to be a problem. And the same thing on the river. When it goes back up to near normal levels, they've put all of the stuff on the side So any number of good storms could produce what we see every couple of years, which is people all along the Mississippi and Missouri being flooded out, the Ohio River too. And then they rebuild in those places, and they put all the stuff back, obviously. So it repeats the cycle again. It gets destroyed. But this time we're in a unique situation where they're playing with the food supply worldwide. And, when you were talking about distilling, I couldn't help thinking about the two types of people, and to bring it back to what I was saying earlier about when things get tough, a lot of people are going to start going to the box chains. There's going to be two situations happening, kind of like the best way I could think about it is like a Hatfield and McCoy scenario, like a near Civil War scenario because of the two types of people in our reality. It's already driven down the lines through cultural and political stuff. But basically, you have city folks. And, that idea that you were saying, well, you need to just go get your meat from a butcher or a rancher or a farmer. That's like saying let them eat cake to somebody that lives in the city. They don't know a rancher. They don't know a farmer. I mean, I'm sure some people do. I'm not saying everybody in the city, obviously, but the vast majority of millions of people concentrated in an area, they don't know a farmer. They don't know a rancher. They're not going to go get meat that way. Matter of fact, they live in a teeny tiny little apartment that couldn't have enough space to pack or prep or anything anyway. They're not going to have a freezer in there. They're not going to have a garage, stuff like that in the major city. So they're going to go to the box food chains and they're going to eat there until that starts to run out. And then, maybe somebody will start panicking at that point. But where are they going to go? They're not going to go out to the farms right away. First, they're going to burn the cities down. First, they're going to loot and flash mob everything in the city until the resources are completely gone. And by that time, you'll know that, things are bad. And by that, and don't get it twisted. There's not just thugs in the city. I've lived around lots of poor people in the country, in the city. There's plenty of thugs in the country. They're all over the place. Matter of fact, the number of drug users, addicts, and people thieving and stuff is really high, actually, out in rural areas. The difference is they know the people. They kind of scope the people. They live with the people, so they know. They watch them all the time, and they're robbing them and stuff like that. But when push comes to shove, those people are going to jump in line real quick because they know that although they've been getting away with it in good times, these ranchers, farmers, and people that own land in rural areas are going to blow them away because they're going to get tired of people stealing from them. So that's going to end real quick for those rural thugs and criminals and stuff. However, there'll be a second wave of people that don't know anything about the rural areas. And matter of fact, they've probably never ventured out into a rural area or in a forest area ever in their life and lived it completely in the city, which will start forming these two types of groups of people that will have increasing agitation and anger, blaming each other for the situation. Some of them will have, some of them will have not. And the politicians will point the have-nots towards the haves. And then you'll be in like a Hatfield McCoy situation of sparking a second civil war because, that started over somebody stealing a pig.
Don't steal the pig, man. You're gonna get in some serious trouble. You're not coming back if you steal a pig, man. Seriously. Yeah, and I'll agree. Plenty of thugs in the country crowd. Drug use is way higher out, but if you're practicing aiming every day, your neighbors are aiming, nobody's coming around because they hear you aiming every day. I know that's a bad place to be. It's a good place to be. Thanks for joining us. Many thanks for the conversation. Great place to be.